Question on contradictions in the Bible. How can you believe in the Bible if it contradicts itself? Because we as Christians believe the Bible is divinely inspired, and therefore what kind of God would it be if it contradicted itself? It doesn't make sense. So we just want to address that. So the first thing would be, I would suggest on the surface possibly they do look like they contradict themselves, but there's two things that I would say you need to look out for before you say it contradicts itself. So the first thing would be to say that two statements might be different and yet not contradictory. So let's say, so there's a story in Matthew about how Jesus went to see, Matthew says two blind men met Jesus, but Mark and Luke, the Gospels, say that only one blind man met Jesus. So that would appear on the surface as a contradiction. But if you look deeper, it's just a differing statement. So say I was going to see my head teacher, I bumped into my head teacher and my teacher, and then I relate this story to Aaron, and I later say, oh, I met my head teacher and my teacher today. And then I go and tell my dad or something in the evening, oh, today I saw my head teacher. Those two statements are not false. I did see my head teacher and I did see my head teacher. They might appear to be contradictory, but they're just different statements. So there's evidence in the Bible that they're not contradictory statements, they're just different statements. That's not contradiction.
The message over time, it hasn't changed. It's been interpreted for lots of different languages because of how widely spread the Bible is. But there's a different emphasis on the messages in certain interpretations itself. But the meaning itself hasn't changed. So I'd say that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. And then the other thing would be, so before you suggest that it's a contradiction, you want to check into this. You've got to remember that the Bible's been translated, and therefore the translation is never going to be perfect. There might be a loose translation from the Greek or the Hebrew, which is most of the Bible written in, to the English. So for one example is, in the Hebrew, I think the word love has 4 different meanings. It has brotherly love, romantic love, family love, whereas in English we only have one word for that. So you've got to watch out. Before saying contradiction, you need to look at the translation and see, is this an accurate translation? It's very easy to say the Bible contradicts itself, but to prove it is another matter. So, was that it?
One example is, which is quite commonly I hear about a lot, is Jesus. He always teaches, love thy neighbour as yourself. We all hear that one. But we also hear in the Bible, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And I can see how that may seem as a contradiction, but it's not, and here's why. So, an eye for an eye was to stop escalation of violence or revenge or retaliation. So, for example, if I stole Josh's pen and Josh stole back his pen, or stole a pen off me, that's an eye for an eye. That's an example of an eye for an eye. However, if Josh went to go and steal my whole pencil case, which had all my pens, glue sticks and everything inside it, which isn't very nice, obviously that's him escalating it and heights of revenge, and that's chaotic, and that's what that passage in the Bible is trying to stop with, trying to squash.
I would encourage you and challenge you to dig deeper and find that there are no contradictions.